It started on a Friday evening broadcast of a major conservative talk show. Senator Tim Scott, seated across from a panel of pundits, was asked about the influence of celebrities in American politics. Without hesitation, he turned his attention to Denzel Washington. "Let's be honest," Tim said with a smug tone. "People like Denzel Washington have no business lecturing the public on morality, politics, or race. Just because you've played a few heroic roles doesn't mean you are one." The comment sent a ripple through social media almost instantly. Scott had never gone after Denzel by name before, and this bold jab shocked many. Within minutes, the clip began circulating across Twitter and Instagram. Hashtags like #Denzel was right and #TimScottSlip started trending. Fans, commentators, and even political analysts weighed in, but no one was prepared for what came next. Because Denzel had heard about it. And he was not staying silent. The following morning, Denzel Washington appeared at a youth leadership summit in Atlanta, an event that had been scheduled weeks in advance. The auditorium was packed with students, educators, and local leaders. Cameras were rolling. No one expected him to respond to Tim Scott's comments. But midway through his speech on integrity and perseverance, Denzel paused. He looked out over the crowd, his voice calm but sharp. "You know, I heard a senator said I shouldn't speak on morality or leadership," he said, folding his hands in front of him. "That playing a few heroes doesn't make you one." There was a hush in the room. Denzel nodded slowly, then added, "Well, here's the thing, I never pretended to be a hero. But I've spent 40 years telling stories that matter. Stories that wake people up. Meanwhile, some folks spend 4 years in office and fall asleep at the wheel." The audience erupted. He wasn't finished. "I don't need to hold a title to have a voice. And I don't need to sit in Congress to tell the truth." Social media exploded again, but this time, with roars of support for Denzel. The clapback had gone viral, and Tim Scott hadn't even blinked yet. Tim Scott's team scrambled to get ahead of the headlines, but the senator wasn't backing off. The next morning, he went live on a popular morning political show. The host asked directly, "Senator Scott, Denzel Washington just responded to your comments, what's your take?" Tim leaned forward and smirked. "Look, I'm not here to win a popularity contest with Hollywood elites," he said. "Denzel's an actor, not a policymaker. He's good at reading scripts. I'm focused on writing real legislation." The host raised an eyebrow. "But don't you think his response struck a nerve?" Tim waved it off. "If it did, maybe that's a sign people are too emotionally attached to entertainers. Let's stop pretending movie stars are political philosophers." Within minutes, that quote was clipped and posted everywhere. But what Scott didn't know was that Denzel wasn't done. He was just getting warmed up. And this time, he was bringing receipts. That evening, Denzel made a surprise appearance on a live stream with a prominent civil rights podcast. The hosts welcomed him like royalty, but Denzel didn't come to reminisce or promote a movie. He came with purpose. "I want to be clear," he said calmly, "this isn't about me. This is about a deeper issue, the disrespect some politicians show to anyone who doesn't fit their narrative." Then, he pulled out a printed copy of one of Tim Scott's past Senate speeches. "You see this?" Denzel held it up. "This is a speech Senator Scott gave in 2020, where he quoted me. Word for word. Praised my message about accountability and fatherhood. Said I was a model of clarity and responsibility." The hosts leaned in. The chat blew up. Denzel looked straight into the camera. "So now I'm suddenly just an actor. Convenient. But let me remind the senator, you can't cherry-pick voices when it benefits you, and then dismiss them when they challenge you." Boom. That moment was clipped and reposted by celebrities, influencers, even former politicians. The internet declared it, Denzel 1, Tim Scott 0. But this wasn't over. Because the next day, things took a turn no one expected. By sunrise, Denzel's takedown had reached over 20 million views across TikTok, X, and YouTube. Commentators from across the political spectrum chimed in, some applauding Denzel for standing firm, others warning Tim Scott that he had picked the wrong one. Meanwhile, Tim Scott's office was under fire. News outlets began digging deeper, unearthing clips of Tim praising other celebrities, from athletes to country stars, when their views aligned with his. But when those same figures spoke out on justice, inequality, or race, Tim's tone suddenly shifted. The word hypocrite began surfacing in headlines. To make matters worse, a video from 3 years ago resurfaced where Tim Scott had actually said, "Voices from entertainment, like Denzel Washington, carry moral clarity this country desperately needs." Oof. It was undeniable, Scott had changed his tune. Public pressure mounted. Even some conservative commentators urged him to clarify or apologize. But instead of defusing the situation, Tim made one more move. He announced he'd be holding a live press conference that afternoon. The press room was packed. Cameras were rolling. And America was waiting. At 3 p.m. sharp, Tim Scott stepped up to the podium in Washington, flanked by aides and a wall of reporters. The room buzzed with tension. Everyone was waiting to see whether he'd walk it back, or double down again. He took a breath and began. "I want to set the record straight," Tim said. "My comments weren't personal. I have respect for Mr. Washington's career. But this idea that celebrities should shape public discourse more than elected leaders, that's the problem." A murmur spread across the room. A reporter from CNN fired back, "But Senator, you've quoted him in the past. Why the sudden shift now?" Tim's smile thinned. "I quoted him when he stayed in his lane." Gasps. The room went silent for a beat, and then questions started flying over each other. "Is that how you view black voices in Hollywood? Do you believe entertainers have no right to speak on policy? Isn't this about control over who gets to speak truth to power?" Scott looked flustered. He tried to regain control, but the damage was done. Clips of that moment were being uploaded in real time. Within 15 minutes, "Stay in your lane" was trending, and not in Tim's favor. Denzel hadn't even responded yet. But he was watching. And what he did next shut everything down. Just hours after Tim Scott's disastrous press conference, Denzel Washington posted a rare personal video on his own social media accounts. No movie promotion, no Hollywood gloss. Just him, sitting in his backyard, no script, no teleprompter. The caption read simply, "Since I was told to stay in my lane." He looked into the camera with a calm, focused expression. "I've spent my life telling stories that reflect the truth of this country, the good, the bad, and the ugly," he said. "If that's not my lane, then whose is it?" He leaned forward slightly. When a public servant tells a citizen to stay in their lane, what they really mean is, stay silent. But I've never been silent. And I'm not starting now. Then he paused, and dropped the line that broke the internet. "Tim Scott, your title might say, Senator, but your words say you're afraid. Afraid of voices you can't control." Mic drop. Within minutes, celebrities reposted it. Activists reposted it. Even journalists who usually stayed neutral were quoting him. The comments were flooded with support, not just for Denzel, but for the right to speak up. Even some Republican voters started asking why their senator was spending so much time beefing with an actor instead of addressing actual issues. Tim Scott's team went silent. But Denzel? He walked away. He said his piece, and he left no crumbs. The morning after Denzel's viral video, Capitol Hill was buzzing, but not about legislation. Reporters swarmed Tim Scott as he entered the Senate chamber. "Senator, do you regret telling Denzel Washington to stay in his lane? Have you spoken with him privately? Is this damaging your credibility with younger voters and black constituents?" Tim didn't respond. He walked fast, eyes down, jaw tight. Meanwhile, other politicians began distancing themselves. A fellow Republican senator was caught on a hot mic saying, "Man, I told him not to poke the bear. On the House side, Representative Jasmine Crockett tweeted, "When you try to silence a legend, you just end up silencing yourself." That tweet alone got over 500,000 likes in under 2 hours. Then came the polls. A flash poll conducted that week showed Tim Scott's approval rating among independents plummeting by 17%, especially among younger voters. Even some longtime donors were privately calling the ordeal a PR nightmare. Meanwhile, Denzel's favorability? Through the roof. He wasn't just seen as an actor anymore, he was seen as a voice of reason, calm authority, and moral clarity in a sea of political noise. But the real twist was yet to come. Because someone else stepped into the ring, and they had first-hand experience with both men, that evening, during a CNN primetime segment, the host teased a surprise guest. No one expected who appeared on screen next, former First Lady Michelle Obama. She wasn't there to talk about the feud, at least, not directly. The conversation was about civic responsibility and leadership in America. But halfway through, the host gently asked, "Michelle, I know you don't usually weigh in on political dust-ups like this, but you've worked with both Senator Tim Scott and Denzel Washington. Do you have thoughts?" She smiled, politely, but sharply. "I believe in public service. I also believe in speaking truth, regardless of your title," she said. "Denzel has done more for uplifting underserved communities than most elected officials ever will." The audience applauded. She continued, "You don't need to be in the Senate to lead. Sometimes, you just need to speak when others won't. And when people try to shut you up for doing that, that usually means you hit a nerve." Social media lit up again. Denzel hadn't said a word since his last video, but now, the tide had become a movement. Influencers, artists, activists, and educators all began using the hashtag #MyLaneMyVoice. What started as one clapback had turned into a national conversation about power, speech, and who gets to use their voice without permission. Tim Scott had tried to end a conversation. Instead, he'd ignited one. By the weekend, #MyLaneMyVoice had become more than a hashtag, it had become a rallying cry. College students organized spontaneous town halls across campuses, inviting artists, community leaders, and even former educators to speak about leadership beyond politics. A viral TikTok challenge was born. People from all walks of life, teachers, firefighters, veterans, nurses, small business owners, posted videos sharing their truth, ending each one with, "This is my lane. This is my voice." Meanwhile, Denzel remained completely silent. No tweets. No interviews. No follow-ups. And that silence made his earlier words echo louder. By Monday, major publications like The Atlantic, Time, and even Forbes ran think pieces with headlines like, "Denzel vs. the System, when integrity outshines power, Tim Scott's biggest misstep, underestimating the voice of the people, #MyLaneMyVoice, the hashtag that turned into a movement." Even late-night hosts joined in, with Stephen Colbert joking, Tim Scott tried to tell Denzel to stay in his lane, but that lane just became the freeway for a national awakening. Behind closed doors, Scott's team began panicking. Donors were quiet. His name had become a punchline, and his upcoming re-election campaign suddenly on shaky ground. His next step would have to be carefully calculated, and desperate. Because one final showdown was brewing. By midweek, Tim Scott's political advisors were in full damage control mode. Internal polling looked grim. Focus groups were brutal. His carefully crafted image as a unifier was now buried beneath headlines mocking his feud with Denzel Washington. So he made a move no one expected. Behind the scenes, Tim Scott's office reached out, quietly, to Denzel's team. A private meeting. No press. Just a conversation. The message was clear: let's settle this like adults. No cameras. No stage. Just respect. Denzel agreed. The meeting took place at a discreet location in D.C. A closed-door room. No aides. No handlers. Just the senator and the actor. What happened inside was never officially released, but sources close to both camps confirmed one thing: it didn't go the way Tim hoped. Apparently, Tim opened with a half apology, saying, "I didn't mean for it to get personal." To which Denzel reportedly replied, "It got personal the moment you tried to publicly silence me." The two men spoke for nearly an hour. At times, firm. At times, calm. But by the end of it, Denzel stood up, shook Scott's hand, and said, "We don't have to agree. But next time, come with respect, not ego." Tim nodded, but the look on his face, according to one insider, was that of a man who knew he'd lost something bigger than a debate. And just when everyone thought things were winding down, Denzel made one final move. Publicly. 2 days after the private meeting, Denzel Washington appeared on stage at the NAACP Image Awards, where he was being honored for a lifetime of achievement, not just in film, but in activism and philanthropy. The crowd stood in thunderous applause before he even said a word. He approached the microphone, took a breath, and began, "I've played generals, lawyers, fathers, and freedom fighters. But none of those roles ever defined me. What defines me is the truth I stand on, and the people I stand with." The room was silent, hanging on every word. "Recently, I was told to stay in my lane," he said, pausing as murmurs stirred. "But here's the thing, my lane is wherever injustice tries to pass unnoticed. My lane is wherever dignity gets dismissed. My lane is wherever truth needs a voice." The crowd erupted. Cameras cut to celebrities in tears. Politicians in the crowd nodded in respect. Even viewers at home flooded social media with messages like, "That wasn't a speech, that was a statement for history." Denzel ended with this, "I may not hold office, but I hold the power of my voice. And if that makes people uncomfortable, good. Change never starts with silence." He walked off stage to a standing ovation that lasted nearly 2 full minutes. The aftermath: Tim Scott never publicly addressed Denzel again. His political momentum faded. The scandal lingered. Meanwhile, #MyLaneMyVoice became a national campaign, taught in classrooms, echoed in protests, and immortalized in pop culture. And Denzel? He returned to what he always did best, telling stories that matter. But this time, the country wasn't just watching. They were listening.